a good girl.
Thanks, Dad.
She's a good girl. She's a good friend of ours, and she does good work. She divides her time right now between Glasgow and Los Angeles. She's half Scottish, which is interesting. And and she has some badass ink on her too. She may show you that later. Some of the tats. And,
Thanks.
And then, but she'll talk, and then at some point, hopefully, you guys will have questions for her. She wants to answer your questions. So, Mary Jo Kaczka.
All right, yay. So, like you said, I'm Mary Jo, and I make shit happen. And that's what I'm going to be talking about, actually, because the bottom line is, like, no matter what your title is, like, it doesn't really matter what your title is. If you do live music, that's your job, is making shit happen. The bottom line is the show, and whatever it takes to make it happen, that's your job. And sometimes it can be under really ideal circumstances, and sometimes it can be under the absolute worst, shitty circumstances where you're totally making it up as you go along. But as long as the show happens, it's cool. For example, there was a couple of years ago, I was on tour in Europe, and the singer was traveling with his girlfriend for a week, and he decided a couple days before we were in Zagreb, Croatia, that he wanted to stay overnight and then fly the next day to Belgrade. And so I called up the travel agent and booked some flights for he and his girlfriend and myself, because I always travel with the band. Or like if one member of the band is separated from the rest and like they're going with the buses, I'll stay with that guy to make sure he gets there. So we were, booked flights, commercial flights, no big deal, except they're on Croatian Air. And so we're going to spend the night, fly to Belgrade, and get there in time for sound check. And so just as the band walked on stage, and I booked them in business class, knowing that like you can always refund a business class ticket, just in case something went wrong. So the band had walked on stage in Zagreb, and 5 minutes later I got a phone call from the travel agent freaking out. And what had happened was they had totally fucked up, and they had accidentally put us in economy, and the flight got oversold and we got bumped. And after spending the entire show on the phone with the travel agent that was the only flight, nonstop flight, to Belgrade. And there was no other connection that was gonna get us there in time for the show, let alone sound check. So basically we were screwed. And I couldn't tell the singer. I was just like, I just had to make it happen. I mean, I had to make it happen. And he wanted to stay overnight. He had friends in Zagreb, and so I ended up back at the hotel that night, up all night on the phone with a couple different travel agents, charter companies. I told our travel agent, that the one that had messed up, that like they had to fix it. And by the time I walked into the lobby the next morning to meet the singer and his girlfriend, I was able to say to him, all right, I have bad news and good news. And the bad news is we've been bumped from our flight. And he's like, but I was like, but the good news is we have a 4-passenger Learjet waiting for us at the airport to take us to Belgrade, and the travel agent's paying for it 100%. And so that was flying by the seat of my pants, literally, and making it happen. But sometimes like the perks are really nice, the way it turns out. And the reason I tell that is like there was a lot of things that like went into me like figuring out how to do that, what needed to be done, and who really should be responsible for that. And that all goes back to me starting out. And so that's what I'm gonna talk about. Making shit happen. It's not calibrated right. Oh well, it'll be good enough. So starting out, when you start out, like it's really important to just take any job you can. Like it doesn't even matter if you're like pushing cases, like your friend's show that's like, putting on a gig somewhere, or if you're answering phones at a production company office, or if you're washing dishes for like the graveyard shift for catering at the Rolling Stones concert at the local stadium. all of which incidentally I've done. And the Stones one sucked. But all of those things, if you do them, you'll get experience. It'll translate to anything. And me starting out taking any job that I could really is what got me to be able to fix the thing and get a Learjet. By doing any job that you can, you'll learn skills that translate to any job in live production. Like even washing dishes. I mean, the skills that I learned, one of the skills was like just staying awake for 24 hours, which is a pretty common thing. You'll gain an understanding of the day-to-day responsibilities of all the jobs on a tour and event. Really, really, really important, because when you become like that guy that's like the production coordinator for a big tour, and you've got like some cranky sound guy that's coming in, like if you've done a local show where you've come in and helped hang PA and put up the monitors, cabled the monitors, tuned the system, been in there all day since 6 a.m., you're going to understand like why he might be kind of cranky that day, because maybe like the riggers messed up and delayed him. And it just helps you become a better team player, which is essential, because it really sucks when there's somebody on a gig that isn't. It can help you clarify what it is that you like to do and that you're good at. Right now, I'm working on writing a book, and I'm interviewing a bunch of women that tour. And I was talking to one girl the other day she's one of the top wardrobe people out there. Like she does like Jay-Z and like Eminem and Yanni. And but Jay-Z is like her big guy. And she told me, I never knew this about her, she started out wanting to do sound. Like she was way into being a sound person. And she was training, she was like going to like engineering school, and like she'd done some gigs. And then somebody asked her one day to help them do wardrobe and dressing rooms for some gig over the weekend, and just doing like we all do, and just taking whatever you can to learn and to make some money. She did it, and she said she absolutely fell in love with it. Like she had no desire to do wardrobe at all, and she was just like, bam, this is my thing. And so, you never know. You might think, oh my God, I want to be a tour manager. But the more you do, aside from gaining skills that you can apply to anything, you might just realize you're a lot better at something else. The other thing is you'll meet other people who'll become contacts. And that's really, really important, because one time I used to be a runner, like forever and ever at Red Rocks, because I'm from Colorado. And I remember one time being up there, and there was, I think it was the tour manager for Pearl Jam. I was telling him that I wanted to go on tour. And I'll never forget what he said, which was that touring is like a private club that can be like really challenging to get into, but once you're in, you're in. And everybody looks out for each other's backs. And it's totally true. Like the very first tour I ever did was the Warped Tour in '97, I think. And the people that were on that tour with me, like it was all of our first kind of proper tour. And now all the people that came up with me, one of them tour manages 9 Inch Nails and the Beastie Boys. The other one tour manages Shakira. One of them does wardrobe for the Red Hot Chili Peppers. One of them is the production coordinator for Green Day. I tour manage Tool. I mean, it's like it goes on. And it's like we all just kind of got our shot, like learned from doing that and being in the trenches. But then once like one person got like a good gig, they would recommend other people for good gigs. And that's totally how it works. The other thing is, like I said, about being a runner, I think that's like hands down the best job you can possibly do when you're starting out. Because if you can get a job on a gig as a runner for like the local promoter, you're working directly for the 2 top jobs on a tour, which is production manager and tour manager. And those are the people, like that's like your working resume. It's like if they see that you're doing a good job, it's like, I remember the really, really good runners, like all around the country. And if they tell me they want a tour, or if I come through town and they want to, like if I ever need a local production assistant, I call them. And also you learn a ton. Like I can always tell if a production manager or somebody has been a runner ever, because like they're so much more organized. Like you learn to organize your day. You learn everything about what a production needs. If it's a slow day, you're sitting in the production office just like taking everything in and learning. And you're learning on the big levels. again, just do everything you can. And that's, gathering all that experience over time is what helped me, that first story, be able to figure out, like, what I needed to do. And as I started doing lots of different things, there were certain things that I just realized I was better at and really, really liked. And so that's kind of what I focused on. And I think it's really important not to just focus on one thing. I have 4 different main capacities that I work in, which I'm going to talk about. You probably know what these jobs are, but I'm just going to kind of touch base on what the basics you do are. But I think it's really important to do more than one thing these days in this economy, because like tours are trying to save money. And so if you can do a couple of things, it saves the tour money, because they only have to pay 1 salary, 1 flight, 1 hotel room, and then you make a little more money than if you're just doing one job. Like there's a ton of tours where there'll be like the front of house sound guy is the tour manager, or the tour accountant, like the tour manager is doing tour accounting, even on big gigs. And the other thing is too, in this economy, like everybody, if you're doing touring, if you're doing live production, I'd say like probably 75% of the people out there are freelance. And so you gotta work it. And the more you can do, the more jobs you can do, the better off you are. And I kind of have seasons, like if I'm not touring, like there's like the festival season, and then after the festival season is when it gets really busy with the promoter. And then over Christmas, sometimes there's short tours I can pick up. So it's like certain times of year, because I'm able to work in different capacities, I can usually keep working. And one skill just transfers to the other. So first thing I do is I'm a tour manager. And right now, since 2006, I've tour managed Tool. And I'm just going to answer the question before it gets asked at the end, which is that no, there's not a new album anytime soon. And but I think they're starting to write. And no, we're not going to tour again this summer, which I'm really bummed about because I need the money. And then I've also tour managed Bauhaus and King Crimson and Kraftwerk and a bunch of other like pretty influential bands that are really arcane and that you've probably never heard of, and or maybe like 2 of you have heard of them. And so it's the highest position on the tour, except the band. And that's really important to remember, actually, because there's so many people that forget that the band is the boss. And they think, oh, the tour manager's the boss. Yeah, they sign the check. You're the primary liaison between management, label, and band. So like on the Tool tour, like the label, like if the albums just come out, like the label does promo with radio stations. So like they'll ship me out like 10 or 15 guitars at the beginning of the tour, and I have to get the guys to sign them, and then I just pack them up and ship them back. Or oh God, there was this one time where they sent out like 100 cymbals, and I had to get them to sign them and send them back, and they weighed like a ton. And they have labels have all sorts of weird ideas. And then also they set up press. So they send me the press schedule, and I make sure that the guys do their interviews. Usually they're just phone interviews. So it's just as easy as like dialing the phone and handing it to them and making sure they do it. Management, typically like with any tour, typically it's just like there's different decisions the band needs to make. So management will call me up and say, hey, can you get this answer from somebody? And so I'll sit with the band member or have a meeting with the whole band and get an answer or decision, go back to management. So basically, I'm the voice of the band to management, and then I'm the voice of management to the band. And then any paperwork that needs to get signed comes through me and stuff like that. So you have to be really discreet and really trustworthy for that. I give the final approval on the budget for the tour and all the expenditures. So what happens is that when we're putting together a tour, the production manager, he'll go out and get bids for trucking and busing and sound and lights and blah blah, all that stuff. But and then he'll bring the lowest. We have a really good production manager, so he just brings me the lowest quotes, and I don't have to question him very much. But if there was, sometimes I'll question the numbers and try to get them down if I say, okay, we need to balance the budget. But basically, I have the final approval and sign off on the budget. Usually, it's a little bit with management, but work closely with the production manager to ensure the tour is put together and runs smoothly. We're putting it together, again, like everything about a tour or an event or any kind of gig, it's all about the advance. All about the advance work. Like, really, it's like if you put together anything really well and really thoroughly, then all it is just like troubleshooting once you're out there, and it's a lot more fun. So we do that. We do a lot of work on the front end, and then like on a day-to-day basis, like a lot of times I'm just hanging out at the like if we had a day off the day before a show, I'll just hang out with the band all day at the hotel and work. So sometimes the production manager, like say they're running late, they got hung up somehow with production, and they're running late, he might call me and say, hey, sound check's going to be 2 hours late. What do you want to do? So then I go to the band and I see if they want to go to the gig and hang out, or if they want to just hang out at the hotel, stuff like that. Like we're just constantly in contact and just making sure that everything runs smoothly for the band and for the crew. Like nobody ever sees that stuff behind the scenes, but all they see is that everything runs super smoothly, and that's why. I travel with the band, run their schedule, book their travel and lodging. And on smaller tours, the tour manager will book all the travel and lodging for the tour. But on bigger tours, there'll be a production coordinator who deals with everything for the crew. And then I just do the band stuff. And that's really, really fun because you get to spend their money on places that you want to stay. It's really fun, actually, when you, because it's like I get to spend their money and stay in places that I could never imagine staying in on my own dime. So that's like, to me, that's the best part of the gig. It really is. It's like the best part of the job. So, second thing I do is I'm a tour accountant, and kind of that really goes along. Like on almost every single tour, the tour manager is also the tour accountant until you get to arena level or above. Because there's just like so many people on tours, like, oh my gosh, like on like the Stones tour, there'll be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people on the crew. It's a full-time job to like pay vendors, make sure everybody gets their per diems, make sure, the shows can take a day or two to settle. And on arena level, it's pretty busy. Usually it's 2 separate jobs, although last summer I decided it would be a good idea to also do the tour accounting while I tour managed Tool, and that was really challenging. So you settle shows. I don't know how much you guys know about settling shows, but in a nutshell, basically, I mean, you're picking up the band's guarantee, like their fee, but typically how show deals are structured is like the band will get a guarantee plus, like, say 85% of whatever, like, overage there is, like back end after expenses. So, like, say your guarantee is $10,000 and there's $50,000 in ticket sales, and the promoter's expenses were like $20,000. Like it costs to put on the show. So like the $20,000 plus the guarantee, that's $30,000. So there's $20,000 left. So you'd get 85% of that. And that's what the tour accountant does. And so you like sit there for hours going out, because you have to go over all of the promoters' receipts, because they have to prove to you they actually spent this money and they're not just like pocketing it. So that's a big part of settling the show, is just going over all of that. And again, that goes back to advancing, because like if you've advanced everything, like with the promoter, you already kind of know what you're walking into, and it can actually make it like easy, and you sit down and you're having a coffee with the promoter and just going over it because you've already talked about everything, and it's enjoyable, and then you can go watch the show. And then you make sure the tour adheres to the budget. You aren't the one with the final sign-off on it unless you're the tour manager, but you're the one responsible for making sure the tour adheres to it. And if you see something getting over, you might question like the production manager or whatever. Or if the production manager, say, comes to you and says, well, we had to add this because, the band decided to bring more stuff, then the tour accountant would go to the tour manager and get them to say okay, or work with them to get it down. Same thing, you're the liaison between the vendors and the business office. Every band these days, even if they're in a van, is pretty much incorporated. It's a business. And you're just working with their business office to make sure that everybody gets paid and that they're getting the invoices. And then you're the human resources person. You call in the payroll, do the per diems, the whole thing. I mean, it's just kind of a fun office job, really. I am also a promoter rep, and I'm a promoter rep for DF Concerts in Glasgow, Scotland, which is the biggest concert promoter in Scotland, and they also do Tea in the Park, which is one of the biggest music festivals in Europe. So what I do is I set up shows per the artist's writer and tech specs. Like I get assigned a show, and then I'll get handed like the artist's writer and their tech specs and their stage plot and stuff, and I contact them and the venue, and I just make shit happen. I hire whatever local vendors, sound, lights, crew, catering, that are needed for the show, or I find out like if the tour is carrying sound and lights and whatever, and make sure that everybody knows that, and just make sure it happens. I obtain any permits needed for the show. Typically, that's just like parking, except for once in a while, like in the UK, if somebody's bringing a gigantic riser and it's over 4 feet tall, it's considered a temporary structure, and I have to go to like the city and get permits for it. But that's the kind of thing you just learn by experience and by not getting it one time and not getting to put up the drum riser. You liaise between the band, venue, local vendors, and promoter to ensure that the show budget is adhered to. So this is like the flip side of touring, because you want to make sure you don't go over budget, because there's potential back end for the band. And if there's back end for the band, there's back end for the promoter, and everybody makes money. So you're helping to make sure that everything stays on budget. And if the show sells out and does well, everybody makes some extra money. You're on site the day of the show at the venue to ensure the day runs smoothly and to troubleshoot any issues and correct. A really, really good example of this is that I was doing a show with this metal band. I think they're from Sweden, called In Flames, and unbeknownst to me, it was their first show on the tour, and unbeknownst to me, the tour manager was having some problems with the lighting guy, he was really green. It was like his first tour, and he wanted to teach him a lesson. And so when I had advanced the show, in the rider, it said they were carrying full lighting production. And if you're carrying full lighting production, that means you have everything. You've got your lighting and your trussing and all the motors to hoist the truss up. So I walk in that morning, and the lighting guy's standing in the middle of the stage scratching his head, and he's like, "Where's the trusses?" And I was like, "This is a big empty room. There's nothing in here. You have to bring everything in. You guys said you had everything." And he's like, "No, I said we're bringing lights." And I said, "No, you said full lighting production." I turn around, and the tour manager's like laughing, going like, "I taught him a lesson." And I'm like, great. So I call our local lighting vendor, because it comes down to me, because I'm the one that has to make the shit happen, because I'm the promoter rep. And luckily, I got hold of our lighting vendor 5 minutes before he walked out of the door with all of his lighting production, almost everything in his warehouse, to go do a 24-hour rave 20 miles away. And, so luckily he had 3 trusses and 6 motors, and he got them there, and we did the show. But that's the kind of stuff as a promoter rep. Like, I wanted to kill that tour manager. I was like, man, that's a really bad way to teach somebody a lesson. But you collect and organize all the vendor invoices for settlement on the day of show. So it's a flip side of the tour accountant thing. I'm the one that makes sure I get all those invoices together to show what I spent. And the promoter counts on me, too, to, get everything, because typically, sometimes I settle shows, but usually it's one of the promoters that comes in and settles it, and I have to have all this stuff for them. And then I manage petty cash for the day of show expenditures. So I have my own runner, and I have, so I have to give them cash if I need to get anything. I have to pay the crew in cash. There's a few vendors you pay in cash on the day of the show. So I have my own little accounting, my own cash flow. A lot of being a promoter rep is exactly the flip side of tour managing and tour accounting and production managing. And I look at a lot of things differently from a lot of the promoter reps who haven't toured, because I'm really tour friendly, and I think about things really differently from touring. The other thing I do is festival and event coordination and management. I work on the Coachella Festival, Bonnaroo, a festival in Denver called the Mile High Music Festival, and Tea in the Park in Scotland. And there's like a few other festivals here and there that I work on or consult on, but those are the big ones. Typically on an event, you're usually, if you're doing the management stuff, you're usually just managing one department, because it's huge. It's your department might have 20 or 30 people. But if you're managing a department, you're part of a team. And if it's like the first year of a festival, you might do site planning. I'm pretty much known mostly on festivals for doing artist relations and artist transportation. And artist transportation can be anything from overseeing like 20 or 30 local drivers with vans to pick up artists from the airport, bring them to the hotels, from the hotels to the site, all the way from that to like organizing like a private jet to bring in an artist, like I did with Prince a couple years ago at Coachella, which was really funny. Like he was in LA and he had to come from LA to India, which is only like a 15-minute flight to do sound check and then fly back. And then like the day after he came to do the show. Like I don't even know why he didn't just stay, but whatever. But yeah, I had to do two private jets for Prince actually. So site planning on the first year of a festival, you might do site planning, but even every year, sometimes you like adapt stuff. So for me, doing transportation, I do a lot of help with routing, like the routes that the artists would take in and out of the festival. And that goes along with liaising with local government offices and officials, because I have to work really closely with the police and like the traffic management for the city, because they reroute, like almost every festival, they'll reroute a lot of traffic. And I get a lot of input on that, which is awesome, because I can get people in and out on special routes and stuff. Like whenever you see a festival, typically the artists go in a way that you would never even know to make it fast. Vendor procurement, for me, that's like getting vans and two-way radios and all that stuff. I hire staff. Liaise with artists. Again, that's kind of the flip side of advancing, you know, and that's something that serves me well too from touring, is that I know from going into a festival with a band what I need. And so I approach, you know, reaching out to artists like that. You know, it's just like when they're flying in, get all their flight information, make sure I take care of them the way they want. And then on-site production management, same thing. So those are like the main things I do, and you can see that like a lot of them, a lot of the skills really overlap. And that's, you know, I'm still doing everything that I can do. I learned something from everything I do that I can apply to everything else, and I can make myself better at doing other things. Uh-huh.
You covered the things that you do,
Mm-hmm.
basically.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to run out of time.
That's cool. I'm almost done. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted you to hit the fact that
Yeah. No, I'm almost done, actually. So I'm going to skip the other one because I kind of already talked about that, about how things overlap. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is there's like certain abilities though that you need, and that's like the big one. Like you can learn all of that stuff and like taking everything you can, but certain things like these are like the things you really need to just have. You have to have attention to detail. You have to be able to multitask. Self-starting, like there's not going to be anybody to tell you what to do typically. You have to be intuitive and resourceful, obviously. Intuitive is just like paying attention to the people around you, what they need, because people always ask for the same stuff, and everybody has a routine. And if you notice that, then you can just think ahead of them. Good attitude and have fun at your job. That's like, for me, that's so key, because it's like, I mean, we could be working in a bank or like in a mortgage office, and it's like, I get to be on a tour bus with bands around the world, and like at the end of the night, I get to like have a drink with rock stars. You know, it's like the best job in the world. You know, it's like, and there's so many people that have a crappy attitude and they're out on the road. I'm like, why? You have to be able to perform under stress and still be nice. Like I said, a good attitude goes a huge, long way. Able to work long hours with little sleep. That's, I mean, a given. Like the first year I worked on Bonnaroo, I did 48 hours straight with 1 hour nap on a table. And and that's like pretty common, you know, like especially if you're getting a gig underway, you're like creating an event or something, and on festivals you don't sleep. And then again, you have to keep a positive demeanor all the time. People that are just nice, you remember them, and people remember you, like when you're nice. You have to be a team player. That's essential. And just finally, just love what you do. If you start doing this stuff, if you start working on events or touring or whatever, and you just find out you don't like it, like it's no problem to go do something else in the business, like, you know, go do management or something like that, because this is a lifestyle. It's not just a job. You're on 24/7 when you're working, and you really have to love what you do, because if you're out all year on tour, that's your life. And but it's really fun. Like, if you love what you do, it doesn't seem like a job ever. Like, I've been doing this for like 15 years. It's the only real job I've ever had, and it's never seemed like a job. Like, maybe for like a day or two here or there when it's a rough day, but it never seems like a job. And you'll go, I think, you know, once you get into that club, if you really love what you do, you'll go far. It's really frustrating when you're starting because it takes a while, but once you're in, and you'll get there. So, there you go. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary Jo.
Uh-huh.
Anybody have questions for MJ? Anybody? Wow, really? No questions?
Oh, no.
What? Yes, thanks, Phil.
Check 1, check 2. Are we on? Is this on? What advice do you have for us, like, younger bands that are kind of following like a more DIY model, where we're not interfacing with like labels?
You know, like, everything these days, even big, is going DIY. Like, seriously, like, so many bands that like I work with, that are even, I mean, not Tool, but even Tool. Like, when we're on tour, those guys print up all their own like silkscreen posters and sell them themselves on tour. Like, everything is going DIY. So everything you can, you know, it's like, just think outside the box. You know, like, what can you do, like, to promote yourself? You know, like, I know, somebody I know was telling me lately that, like, uploading downloadable tracks for free, like, actually people think that helps, or that'll hurt your sales, like, if you get to the point you want to sell tracks, but actually, apparently, like, according to research, it helps sell them, because, you know, people think, oh, I get to try this out. You know, kind of like Radiohead, when they did that album for free, but they actually made a ton of money off of it, because a lot of people were paying, like, the full price, you know, so, like, everything is going DIY. So, like, anything you can do to think outside the box, really, and tour, like, play live. It's the only place anybody's making money these days, like live, like bands. So, you know, you're right there with like the bands that are even bigger. Everybody's going back to touring, you know, just play your ass off live and make, you know, once you get to play more, just, you know, promote yourself a lot online, you know, so.
Okay, anybody else?
Mm-hmm. Who what? That would be the agent. Yeah. How do the agents go about that? I mean, the thing is the reason a band, I mean, going back to like a smaller band who's touring, it's just like if you're a smaller band and you're like booking your own tour, you kind of hear through word of mouth, like through friends, like where the good markets are or like where the good venues are. And that's how agents are. It's like they're just bigger, you know, like they get feedback from other bands and they just have relationships that they build because they have so many bands that they work with. But you kind of, the major markets are going to be good for certain music and. Yeah, I mean, that's why, you know, bands that are larger, I mean, they don't even have to be that gigantic, you know, that's why a lot of bands that are doing a lot of touring get an agent. Because they know those, you know, they know that. You know, they have access to all of that information because they don't just have your band, they have lots of different bands, lots of different types of music, so they can see what's playing well in certain places. But yeah, certain, you know, for example, like.
For a young band with no agent, I think
yeah.
the best source of information is
other bands. Yeah.
Everybody, you know, bands can get you more gigs than clubs can.
There used to be this.
Yeah.
There used to be this really cool guide, but I don't think it's out anymore. Do you remember that was called Book Your Own Fucking Life?
Oh, it's still out.
Is it still out?
Yeah.
That's really good, because they update it all the time, and like people do, like bands do input and stuff. It's not that hard to book your own tour.
BYOFL.org, and yeah, basically it'll put you in touch with bands and DIY promoters.
Yeah, and one thing I was gonna say is if you book your own tour, like you can totally, and you should apply like all the super pro, like, ways of like coordinating it and organizing it and putting it together, it will make you like stand head and shoulders above every other band that books their own tour with promoters. Like when a promoter's like, oh man, they're so organized, and they even though they're they work like pros, they want you back, So.
All right. Any other questions, especially women? Yeah, Maddie.
Well, there's like a ton of books out, like about women in bands that've been touring, and then there's those stupid books that Pamela DeBar wrote about like groupies, and I'm like, oh my God! I was reading one of them. It was actually, that was what gave me the inspiration. It was like interviews with super groupies, and there was this one girl in there who was talking about how she got a job doing merch by like sleeping with the merch guy, and she was just like, I figured that's how you get in the business, and I was like. I was actually being physically sick while reading that. And I was like, and there's nothing in between. There's nothing about women behind the scenes who tour. And so I just decided, fuck it, I'm going to write my own book. And so I just started, I'm just interviewing women that tour. And I'm just going to do a collection of interviews. Like, I thought I was going to do, like, different chapters on different issues. But honestly, like, the stories are so awesome that I'm just going to do a collection of interviews. Like, people's stories about getting in and what they've gone through are just really, really cool. So that's what I'm doing. I don't know when it'll ever be out, but I mean, I'm still in the process of, it's really hard to find, like, I'm trying to interview women who do every job on a tour, and it is almost impossible. There are like no women that do guitar teching or drum teching. So somebody should start so I can interview you, because I can't find anybody. I can't find anybody who does that. It's crazy. There's like, I thought there'd be at least one or two girls, and I found one girl guitar tech, but I know like some major like drummers and drum techs, and there's not one girl drum tech out there that we can think of. It's crazy. So there should be more girls doing it, but. That's all right. No, I've been working with them since 2006, but I met them in 2001. I was tour managing King Crimson, because what happened was that King Crimson was, they're like old band from like the 60s, but like they're super influential, and Tool said they were like their biggest influence, and so they were going to do like this 2-week run with them, kind of opening, kind of double bill kind of thing in theaters. And I was working with another band at the time, this band called Skinny Puppy. And their manager was going to be the kind of the American coordinator for King Crimson, because he knew more about like this type of touring, with Tool. So he called me up and he's like, hey, their regular tour manager, I have this band and their regular tour manager can't do it, and I really want somebody young who like gets them, because they're going to be opening for this young band. And I was like, oh, what band are they opening for? And he's like, Tool. And I was like, oh, fuck, they're like my favorite band. And I was like shitting myself. And then I was like, well, what band is it that I'm going to be working for? And he's like, King Crimson. And I was like, oh my God, Robert Fripp, shit. And so yeah, I got off the phone and I was like, ew, I didn't ask how much I was going to be making. And so needless to say, I took the gig. But that's how I met the Tool guys, was on that. And then I got to be, actually stayed in touch with Adam, because we got on really well. And he and Danny I stayed in touch with, and their manager. And then in 2002, they asked me to tour manage them, but I was on another tour. And I just, that would just look really bad to step off another tour. Even though I was like, I would have been the tour manager for the Latter Alice tour, and I couldn't do it. I was like, and typically gigs don't come back. But it just so happened that in 2006, the tour manager who they'd had forever had to step off that tour for some personal reason, and they called me. So that's how I ended up working for Tool. And I remember being in the middle of a parking lot, and they're like, the manager was like, you're never going to believe this, but we want you back. And I was like, ah! So that's how I ended up working with Tool. But they're awesome. They're super, super cool guys. So, yeah.
Anybody else? Anything else? Yes?
Well, they're not really touring, but I stay in touch with them. Like, I email with Robert. Pardon? I think that they always do, like, Robert just always does stuff, you know, probably they did some dates, but they're not really touring. Like, they may do a show here or there, but Robert's always doing something, you know, he's like always collaborating with people and stuff like that. So he's probably, I think he's doing a few little projects, but no. Pardon? He's so nice. Everybody thinks he's like the weirdest guy, but he's like the nicest guy ever. And so he loves cheesecake. Yeah, he does. He likes a slice of cheesecake after every. I'm probably like giving away trade secrets here. Yeah, he's like a total freak for cheesecake. So if you ever meet Robert Fripp, just bring him a cheesecake and like you're in. But